So you ready to have some fun? You see, I like doing performance testing. I love digging into the nitty gritty, figuring out what is best. As much as I kind of poked fun in the last video at, hey, 7,300 versus 8,300 milliseconds, give me a break. You know what? I do like that kind of stuff. And I love seeing those little bitty differences and knowing which one is 5% better. So I'm going to show you in this video, the next video, I don't know how long this is going to take. It takes as long as it takes. I'm going to show you a package that you can actually take with you and you can run on your own, and you'll be able to use this to test all kinds of different scenarios to figure out what works for you. So the package that I have here is going to generate for this example, an Excel spreadsheet that will then allow us to figure out which performs the best. Like I can go ahead and kick it off here right now. And it's probably going to continue to run throughout the time that we're talking here because it's doing a lot of different tests. You can see that I've broken it into the three main tasks we were going to talk about. There's a bunch of tests for the data flow task, a bunch of tests for the bulk insert task, and then a couple of tests for the execute SQL tasks. So I just put in T-SQL. I don't know why. So we're going to be able to take a look at that Excel spreadsheet and extrapolate from that which one performed the best. Now, for this example, I'm actually using an incredibly small text file of only about 100,000 rows. Why? Because I'm on a virtual machine, so I'm not even as fast as IDE hard drives here. I'm on a really slow, at least from a disk standpoint, a slow machine, and so it's going to slow down my inserts. And also, I want it to end so that we can actually see the results. So if I were really doing a real test, I would set this on probably a 5 to 10 million row text file on some really fast, a database with really fast hardware. And I would then probably have it run overnight, come back in the next morning so that I could take a look at the results. So I'm not doing that only in the interest of time. However, I'm going to give you at the end of this video, attached with this video, a way in which you can do that on your own if you want to further extend these tests. So you can see the data flow tasks have all completed. Right now the bulk insert task is going through and doing the tests. And while that's doing it, we'll go ahead and take a look at kind of what's been going on in the tasks. First off, let's take a look at the package level variables. So this is really, really important because we're going to use the package variables anytime that we do reporting. So we want to know how many iterations that we're going to do. So for example, each one of these tasks is done this many times. So we want to know which is the best and the slowest and the average of the times, right? So we run the exact same task 10 times. And then we store the execution of each time in a variable corresponding with the number, which is the current execution iteration is stored in the counter. And it looks like we finally actually finished here. And then we have a stopwatch, and our stopwatch allows us to time the elapsed milliseconds. And then we have a task description, which I'll show you what that is for. But you can see that it was complete. So we can get back over here. We can take a look at our Excel spreadsheet. And the output of this is this particular spreadsheet. So let me do this and we'll put that there. So you can see, let me see if I'm grouping these maybe with like a colorization. Oops, sorry. Just so that we can pick them out a little easier. Leave those the same. I probably could have just banded them, couldn't I? I mean, that would have probably been the easiest thing to do. But, you know, I don't think you mind that much. So you could see that we ran a task called the data flow task default settings 10 times. The first time that it executed, it took 929 milliseconds. So you see that's the execution time in milliseconds. I'll zoom in to where maybe it's a little easier to see here. These little arrow things right here are simply the fact that we have a number and we're storing it as text. Like if I go up in here and I say this is a number with no decimal places, no, it still didn't like that. Um, I was hoping to get that out, but that's what it's saying. It's a number stored as text. Convert to a number. Ignore. That's all that is. So you can see here for the data flow task with the default settings, here are the 9 values. And then we could actually come up over here and say, hey, what's the average for these values? And that comes up to be a divide by 0. So the average, did I do something wrong? Dividing by 0. I don't know what I did wrong there. Um, I know that if I sum those numbers and divide by 10.0, what, what am I doing wrong? Are these not being stored as numbers? What is it doing here? It's a number, okay? And the sum of those numbers is not 0. Gosh, I'm clearly doing something weird. Um, how peculiar. You see that little thing there. That's just one of the peculiarities of Excel. Is that causing a problem here? And there we go. Golly. When you export to Excel, it appends this little tick right there. Golly. Um, and it can't find it, so we'll copy. And how weird. Like I'm just copying and pasting and saying find, and it can't find it. Yet I copied it right out of there. I despise working with this sometimes. Anyway, I would have some work to do, and I'm not going to do that here because we would just waste a ton of time. But you can actually use this now. One of the cool things that Excel does have is the ability to create groups and subgroups. So we can now group this data on the rows, and you see that we could do this here by the task description, but what I probably would want to do is I would want to make a subgroup here, group this here, and that way I could see for all of the data flow and all of the default settings. So here's how you do this, and I'm on Excel 2007 to do this. Grab the first row and the next to last row and get the whole row and click the data tab and go to group, and then you can expand or collapse all of the groups there. It just makes it easier to later on and analyze a large amount of data where you have a lot of different points here. So like for example, now I can actually see, and I could say I want to see what is it like with the data flow task with fast parse on. Okay, go down in here, take a look. Boy, that's pretty fast. Then come back over here, go down to the bulk insert with the tab lock. Well, gosh, that's even faster. Okay, so I kind of like that ability to use that group functionality there. And what I will often do is instead of going to this and getting the last row, um, I'll do it this way. Hold on, I'll go back to the originals. And I will insert a row right here for that with with all, and then I would get all of these and I would get the average. So this would become the average execution, and let's just say it's 913.55 for the time being. And then I would grab these and I would go to data and group. And that way on my grouping, let's just move in right here. On my grouping, you could then have an aggregate. For all, the average is 913. And I could then drill down into getting the detail elements of the iteration if I wanted to. Kind of cool. Anyway, so what I want to show you is now that you have this ability to create these final results, how does this package actually work? So let's go back over here to integration services. So you could do this. I've got this, let me think of the best way to get you to be able to do this. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say, now this is built on the AdventureWorks 2008 database. And so here's what I'm going to do. Let's see. Give me just a second. I'm going to make this a little more extensible. Okay. So let me just make sure this actually works. Create table. Looks good. Looks good. Okay. And I am going to break that down and say uncomment this to make big table. Okay. So here's what's going to happen. We've got a table in the AdventureWorks 2008 database, and it brings back about 120,000 rows that are all integers. You could see the number of rows down here. And it's just got 4 columns. And what I did is I've created a new table that adds a 5th column just for uniqueness. It is an identity column. So I then insert into that table and allow the identity column to be generated. And that creates 120,000 rows. From that 120,000 rows, I've built a text file called bigfile.txt. Nothing fancy. You see right here is the identity column. And now we want to load this up. So this is our bulk load text file. Again, it's only 120,000 rows so that I could test it for you. It's only about 200 megabytes. I'm sorry, about 2 megabytes, 3 megabytes. And down here, if you wanted to make this bigger, once you've created the table, simply insert into it with a select based on itself. So this will cause a new identity column to generate. And so if you just ran this one more time, it's going to add another 120,000 rows. So there would now be 242,000 rows in. If you did it again, though, it's 242,000 times 2. So there would now be about 484,000 rows. You do it again, it's 484,000 times 2. And so if you did this 7 times, then whatever the expansion is of that, I don't know, but probably 7 million, 15 million, somewhere in that. It just keeps doubling, exponential growth. So if it goes through exponential growth 7 times, what does that become from 121,000? I don't know. I think it's like either 7 or 15 million, somewhere in there. So I don't want to do that because that's going to take hours for it to do your test. Okay? We don't want to do that. But if you want to make a big table, I'm using a database here. I'm actually using the AdventureWorks 2008 database. Be careful. Okay, this will add a gig or more to your database. So make sure that you have the space to do so. Now, the second part of this is that I've created a database called LoadMe. And the LoadMe database is a 4 gigabyte database, I believe. So actually it's a little bit larger. You could see that the data file is 3 gig and the log file is about half. So we're going to load this, so you're going to have a little bit of space. So if you want to follow along, go ahead and create a LoadMe database with about a 3 gig data file and a 1.5 gig log file just to do like 5 million row test or something to that effect. Now, let's go back over here to integrations. I tell you what, let's pause here. We'll come back in the next video. We'll go through the rest of the setup of this.